Okay, so with this, we're going to have a look at past modals. So modal verbs, you should all know modal verbs by now. Could, would, should, can, might, must, and have to, kind of. So some examples, you have to go is an obligation. You should go is advice. And you could go is an option. These are all examples of using modal verbs in the present. Now, as the name suggests, past modal verbs, we are looking in the past tense. We still use them to show obligations, possibilities, and advice, but instead of giving advice or talking about obligations of things that people have to do now, it's talking about things in the past. So let's look at the picture on the following page. Now, this picture comes from World War I. Now, these soldiers here are about to run over that ledge where the enemy are going to try and shoot them and kill them. Absolutely terrifying. So this obviously happened in the past. Now we're going to look at some sentences. We're going to form some sentences of us speculating what these men might be feeling, what might happen, talking about advice, what they should have done, what would be better, and then talking about some obligations or necessities of these men. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's start speculating. They must have felt scared. Now, these poor men are just about to go and run and be shot at, and the other people are going to try and kill them. They must have been terrified, must have been absolutely scared. This must have been very dangerous. Obviously, someone shooting at you, that's pretty dangerous. These men could have died. Now, specifically these men here, they're about 10 seconds away from jumping over here and being shot at. So these particular men, 20 seconds after this photo was taken, these men could have died. These men could have died, but they might have survived. We don't know. We're speculating. When we're speculating in the past, we use the modal verbs must, might, could, and may, and then the present perfect. So with the examples, we can see we must have felt scared. Must is the modal verb. Have felt, present perfect. Again, next one, must modal verb, have been. Must, could modal verb, have died, present perfect. Might modal verb, have survived, present perfect. Must is used if we are sure, and could, may, and might are used if we're not sure. It's more of a possibility. But must is it's a possibility and we think that probably happened. Okay, so these are us speculating. Now we're going to move on to giving advice. Now, if we're giving advice, obviously, if we're giving advice in the past, nobody can take the advice, but it is used for saying what would have been a better idea. Perhaps. So they did this, but if they did it this way, this would be better. Now with this, we use the modal verb should. So let's give some advice to these men here, or what would have been better. These men should have worn more protection. So you can see they have helmets, but they don't have any protection on their bodies. So they should have worn more protection. They should have gone at night when it was dark. So we can see it's light here, the enemy can see them. If they went in the dark, maybe that would be better. So they should have gone at night. So when we're giving advice in the past, we use the modal verb should and in the present perfect. Should have worn, should have gone. So if we're looking at obligations, what they had to do, what they needed to do, we use the words had to or needed to. These men had to fight to save their country. They needed to wear a helmet. Needed to and had to aren't technically modal verbs, but we often use them together. Can you think of anything else to say about this photo? Maybe giving some advice, or speculate on how they must be feeling or what might be happening. Or maybe give me more information about the obligations of these men. Have a think. Okay, so let's look at a different photo. These are indigenous people from Australia that ruled the land before the white people came and took it over. So let's have a look and speculate about this. They must not have had much money. They might not have seen white people. It couldn't have been easy living in the forest. Now you can see here, we're making these examples we have here are negative examples. When we're speculating in the past in negative forms, sentences are formed the same way, just with not or nt. So, subject, modal verb, not plus present perfect. Subject, modal verb, not present perfect. Okay? Again, similarly, must is when you're quite sure, and might and couldn't when you're not so sure. White people should not have conquered Australia. These people shouldn't have been killed. When we're advising in the past or talking about what would be better in negative forms, sentences are formed the same way, just with not or nt. Subject should not plus present perfect. When we're writing negative forms of had to and needed to, because they're not officially modal verbs, they act differently. Normal simple past grammar rules apply. So, they didn't have to go to school. Notice here that when we say have to, it's an obligation, but when we say they didn't have to, it's saying just that they weren't obligated. Not saying that it was prohibited, but it was not obligated. They didn't need to wear clothes. Now again, remember the past simple grammar rules. Didn't, if we use the word auxilia didn't, the verb then goes in the present tense. So, in this case, subject plus didn't plus have or need. So let's have a quick look at the grammar rules, which we've gone over here. If there's an obligation or a need, we can say they had to eat or they needed to eat. Or in negative, they didn't have to eat, they didn't need to eat. If we're speculating and we're sure, it could be they must have eaten or they mustn't have eaten. If we're speculating and we're not sure, they couldn't have eaten. They could, might, may have eaten, or they could not have eaten. They might not have eaten. They may not have eaten. And if we're giving advice, we say they should have eaten or they shouldn't have eaten. Okay, your turn. Have a look at this photo. I'll give you some sentences using the past modal verb rules that we've just looked at. Talk about maybe some advice. Talk about maybe you're speculating what might be happening here, or what the obligations of these men are or aren't. Okay, please record a video and send that to me. Thanks.